Missile warning. Evasive action.
We're hit! We're hit! Mayday!
All stations report ready! Ready, sir! Launch!
Warning, missile threat. Eject! Eject! Eject!
On March 27, 1999, the impossible happened. An invisible aircraft, a marvel of American engineering, fell from the sky over Serbia. But this wasn't some catastrophic failure. It was shot down by a missile system designed in the 1950s, operated by a cunning commander with outdated equipment and a brilliant mind. The pilot survived. The commander kept a piece of the wreckage in his garage, and years later the two men who should have been enemies became friends. Welcome to Hidden Valor. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this video from? March 1999. NATO was 4 days into Operation Allied Force, bombing Yugoslavia to stop the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. The skies belonged to the most advanced military alliance in the world. They had stealth fighters, precision weapons, total air superiority. On paper, it was no contest. Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko sat in the cockpit of his F-117 Nighthawk, call sign Vega 31. The jet had a nickname, something wicked. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. All angles and flat surfaces painted matte black. This was the aircraft that had dominated the Gulf War. Invisible to radar, untouchable. That night, Zelko had just released his bombs over Belgrade. His mission was done. He was heading home to Aviano Air Base in Italy. Before takeoff, he'd eaten his usual pre-mission meal, grape nut cereal with dried cranberries. Everything felt routine, but routine was exactly the problem. 30,000 feet below, a Serbian officer named Zoltán Dani was waiting. He commanded the 3rd Battalion of the 251st Air Defense Missile Brigade. His weapons were Soviet-era S-125 missiles. NATO called them SA-3 Goa systems. They were designed in the 1950s. By 1999, most military experts considered them obsolete, relics from a different era. Dani didn't care what the experts thought. He was born in 1956 in a small village called Skorenovac. He was of Hungarian descent. He'd spent his entire career studying warfare, reading everything he could find about tactics, technology, and air defense. In 1982, he watched Israel destroy 29 out of 30 Syrian missile sites in just 2 hours during the Lebanon War. That lesson burned into his mind. Mobility meant survival, so Dani trained his men to do the impossible. The SA-3 system wasn't designed to move. It was supposed to stay in one place. But Dani drilled his crews until they could pack up the entire battery and relocate in 90 minutes, half the normal time. They became ghosts themselves, never staying in one spot long enough to be targeted. He created strict rules. When his fire control radar turned on, it could only stay active for 20 seconds. Then they had to shut down and move, whether they'd fired or not. Other Serbian units ignored this discipline. They kept their radars on too long. NATO's HARM missiles found them and destroyed them. Not Dani's unit. He built decoys using old MiG fighter radars. He scattered them around his real position. NATO wasted 23 HARM missiles trying to kill his battery. They never even came close. But Dani had a bigger problem. How do you shoot down an invisible plane? He studied stealth technology obsessively. He learned that the F-117 wasn't truly invisible. It was just very hard to detect. Its angular shape deflected most radar waves away, but not all of them. Dani discovered something interesting. His P-18 surveillance radar, an ancient system with vacuum tubes and a huge rotating antenna, could pick up a faint signal when tuned to the lowest possible frequency. Long wavelength radar, the kind most modern systems had abandoned. NATO's radar warning receivers weren't calibrated to detect such low frequencies. The F-117 pilots had no idea they were being watched. At that low frequency, Dani could track a Nighthawk from about 15 miles away. It wasn't precise. It was just a blob on the screen, but it was something. Combined with the short range of his missiles, it might be enough. Dani had other advantages, too. He had spies, people stationed outside the Italian air bases where the F-117s took off. They'd watch the aircraft launch and relay information. How many planes? What time? Other spotters near the Serbian border would report when the jets entered Yugoslav airspace. This intelligence network meant Dani could keep his radar off most of the time, only turning it on when he knew targets were nearby. But his biggest advantage was something he couldn't have planned. NATO's arrogance. The Americans were flying the same routes, over and over, night after night. The same altitudes, the same flight paths. In Iraq during Desert Storm, they'd never done this. They randomized everything. But in Yugoslavia, mission planners got complacent. The F-117 had never been shot down. Why change what was working? Some pilots complained. They knew it was dangerous, but nobody listened. On March 27th, the weather was terrible over the Adriatic. Most NATO aircraft canceled their missions, but not the F-117s. 8 of them took off that night. Dani received intelligence that electronic warfare aircraft, the EA-6 Prowlers that normally jammed Serbian radars, weren't flying. The Wild Weasel anti-radar planes stayed on the ground too. The Nighthawks were alone. Dani broke his own rules that night. Normally, he'd only risk 20 seconds of radar time. But the conditions were perfect. He had intelligence on the flight path. He knew roughly when to expect them. He kept his long-range radar running longer than usual, sweeping the sky. At 8:15 p.m., his P-18 picked up a contact, a faint return, an F-117. His crew tracked it. The jet was following the predicted route. Dani waited. The aircraft had to come closer. His missiles only had about an 8 to 14-mile engagement range against a stealth target. If the F-117 flew just 10 degrees different, they'd miss their chance entirely. But Vega 31 flew straight toward them. Dani's fire control radar operator switched on. They had seconds. The high-frequency radar locked on. The range was about 8 miles. Perfect. 2 missiles launched. In the cockpit, Dale Zelko saw them rising through the clouds. 2 white streaks cutting through the darkness, coming straight at him. The first missile passed close enough to buffet his aircraft, but it didn't explode. It missed. The second one didn't. The proximity fuse detonated. Shrapnel tore through Something Wicked's left wing and fuselage. The explosion was massive. A NATO tanker flying over Bosnia saw the flash from 50 miles away. The aircraft tumbled out of control. Zelko experienced -6 Gs. The world spun. He could barely move. Every second counted. He fought to reach the ejection handle. He pulled it. The seat rocketed him clear. His parachute opened. He was alive, but he was deep in enemy territory. The wreckage of the F-117 tumbled to earth and crashed inverted in a farmer's field near the village of Bujanovci. The first and only stealth aircraft ever shot down in combat. Zelko landed hard. He hit the ground in an irrigation ditch and immediately went into survival mode. He had a radio. Against his training, he started transmitting while still in the air, figuring the altitude would give his signal better range. The KC-135 tanker that had witnessed the explosion heard him. They relayed his position. Serbian search parties combed the area. They came within 100 meters of where Zelko was hiding. He could hear them, see their lights. He stayed perfectly still. 6 hours later, an Air Force combat search and rescue team found him. An MH-60G Pave Hawk helicopter swooped in. They extracted him under cover of darkness. He was going home. The wreckage stayed behind. The U.S. considered bombing it. F-15E Strike Eagles, armed with AGM-130 missiles, went on alert, but by the time they got approval, CNN crews and civilians had already reached the crash site. It was too late. The Serbians recovered the remains. Some pieces went to Russia, some to China, countries desperate to understand American stealth technology. Other fragments ended up in the Museum of Aviation in Belgrade, where they remain today. Danny kept a souvenir. The titanium engine outlet heat shield. It's still in his garage. Pentagon officials downplayed the loss. They said the F-117's technology was from the 1970s anyway. They'd already revealed the aircraft's existence in 1988. It appeared at air shows. How secret could it be? But Paul Kaminsky, who helped develop the F-117, wasn't so casual. He worried about foreign stealth programs more than counter-stealth technology. The aircraft had been in service 15 years, but some of its systems were still ahead of what potential adversaries possessed. Danny's unit struck again. On May 2nd, they shot down an F-16. The pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Goldfein, ejected and was rescued. Goldfein would later become Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. There were rumors of other hits, too. Another F-117 was reportedly damaged on April 30th. It made it back to Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany, but supposedly never flew again. Some of Danny's crew even claimed they hit a B-2 Spirit bomber, though that's never been confirmed. The war ended in June 1999. Despite NATO's air superiority, they never destroyed Danny's missile battery. His unit remained a threat throughout the entire campaign. NATO pilots had to fly above 15,000 feet to stay safe from his missiles, which made ground attacks far less effective. Danny's success changed military thinking. It shattered the myth that stealth aircraft were invincible. It proved that older technology, used cleverly, could defeat cutting-edge systems. It showed that predictability and overconfidence could be more dangerous than any missile.
The U.S. Air Force created new training programs. They revised tactics. Newer stealth aircraft like the F-22 and F-35 incorporated lessons from that night over Serbia. But the fundamental truth remained. No aircraft is truly invisible, not if someone knows where to look. After the war, Danny retired from the military. He never received official decorations. The political situation was too complicated. But in Serbian military circles, his unit is legendary, the only force to ever shoot down a stealth aircraft in combat. He opened a bakery in Skoranovac, just a quiet life in a small village. Dale Zelko stayed in the Air Force and eventually retired. Then something unexpected happened. In 2011, the two men met, the pilot and the commander who shot him down. They were introduced at an aviation conference. There could have been anger, resentment. Instead, they talked. They shared their stories. They found respect for each other as professionals who'd both been doing their jobs. They became friends. There's even a documentary about their friendship called The Second Meeting. Two warriors from opposite sides, brought together by one incredible night. Zelko holds no grudge. Danny takes no malicious pride. They're just two men who lived through something extraordinary. Every year on March 27th, Danny's old unit holds a reunion. They serve a cake shaped like an F-117. It's not about celebrating death or destruction. It's about remembering the night when everything changed, when a group of outgunned soldiers with outdated weapons proved that human ingenuity could overcome technological superiority. The story of Vega 31 is a reminder. Wars aren't won by equipment alone. They're won by the people who use it, by commanders who study their enemy, by crews who train relentlessly, by soldiers who refuse to give up even when the odds seem impossible. It's a story about humility, too, about what happens when you start believing your own hype, when you think you're untouchable, when you forget that on the other side, there are people just as smart, just as dedicated, just as willing to do whatever it takes. The F-117 Nighthawk retired from service in 2008. Some aircraft went to museums. Others were placed in storage, maintained in case they're ever needed again. The program achieved incredible things. but it will forever be remembered for one night in March when the invisible became visible. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Hidden Valor for more.